Hello chess friends and welcome to the channel. Today is day 1 of the grand final between Magnus Carlsen and Wesley So for the Fischer Random World Championship title. The first 45 minutes game ended in a draw. Carlsen was better in pressing, but Wesley So defended well. Game 2 instead is a decisive game, and this is the game that we are going to watch together. Wesley So with white pieces against Magnus Carlsen with black. Let's get started. Wesley opens with d4, controlling the center. Magnus Carlsen answers with b6, opening the diagonal for the bishop and for the queen. Knight to g3, that will support the e4 push. Here comes bishop to a6, that is preventing this push, because in case of e4, Magnus Carlsen will change the bishops, but not only that, because then white will be forced to recapture with the king or with the rook, and in any case, Wesley So won't be able to castle short anymore. So here comes b3, e6, c4, closing this diagonal for the bishop, and d5, attacking c4 a second time. With e3, now the bishop is also protecting c4, bishop to e7, and knight to c3. Knight to g6, bishop to d3, short castle for Carlsen, and also short castle for Wesley So. Knight to d7, probably with the idea to help one of these two pawn pushes. So here comes c captures on d5, bishop captures, rook captures, and the e-pawn recaptures on d5. Knight to f5, attacking the bishop, rook in f goes to e8, the knight captures the bishop with check, the rook recaptures, and in this position there is a slight advantage for white. There are at least a couple of good plans. Let's just briefly watch one of them. With knight back to e2, clearing c3, this is probably the simplest plan to understand. So with knight to e2, then c6, rook to c3 with the rook on the semi-open file, a5, because black is stronger here on the queen side, bishop to d2, then queen to b2, and knight to g3, white will slowly improve all of his pieces. Instead, after the rook recaptures on e7, here comes b4, knight to f6, b5, and here comes c6, a4, h5. This is not a mistake, but c captures on b5, and then rook to c7 seems to achieve something more. After h5, Wesley So continues with h3, so stopping this pawn advance at least for now. Queen to c8 and b captures on c6. Rook to e6, f3 now, good move. Also a5 against black structure here on the queen side is another good idea. Now rook captures, and finally e4. D captures, f captures. Here comes knight to e5, attacking the rook. That is a good move because the pawn can't capture this knight, because the pawn is pinned to the rook that is on d3. So rook to e3, knight to c4, another good move, attacking the rook again, and in fact this is a good move, but capturing with the rook on d4 is a bad idea. Let's watch why. Let's go back one move. Rook captures on d4 is a bad idea because here comes knight back to e2, attacking the rook that can't move away, because behind the rook there is an unprotected knight. So let's go back to our game. After the rook moves away, here comes knight to c4, and the rook must move again. Rook to f3 is a natural square. Now rook captures on d4 is okay to play. Knight to d5, the rook is under attack. Rook captures, and this position probably a bit better than what Wesley So played is knight captures on f6 with check, but even bishop on h6 is a good move. Knight to e8, protecting the pawn is not a bad move at all. Probably the best defense, if we go back one move, is queen to d7. Not only attacking the knight, but in this position the queen is quite active. If white continues with knight captures on f6 with check, there is g captures, rook captures, rook captures, queen captures, but white has no time to go on with this attack, because here comes queen to d4 with check, also forking the queen. With this fork, there will be the queen exchange that favors black, that remains a pawn up. So let's go back to our game. We said bishop to h6, of course capturing, lose the game on the spot. Knight back to e8, also a new defender of g7. Bishop captures on g7 anyway. Now capturing the bishop with the knight loses the game. Let's watch why. If knight captures, there is rook captures on f7, threatening checkmating one with the queen. So rook to g6 must be played to protect g7. Rook captures, we check. Rook captures. Knight to f6, we check. Wins back the rook. It seems that the position, if we watch the material, is equal, but the king is so exposed that after king to h8 and knight captures on e4 is more than +3. Why? At first, the black queen can't leave the protection of the back rank. Let's watch what happens with queen to e8. Sorry, let's watch what happens with queen to d7, queen to c7. So, leaving the protection of the back rank. Here comes rook to f8, we check, king to h7, knight to f6, we check, king to h6, queen to c1, we check, and the king is almost in the net. Let's go back to our knight capture. If queen to e8, here comes queen to d4, also attacking this knight, knight to e5, protected by the queen, knight to f6, we check, with tempo against the queen, queen to e7, rook to f5. The knight is 2 times under attack, the rook will capture on h5, we check, is +7. And if black doesn't play one of these two moves, but remains passive, let's say, let's make a free move. If after knight captures on e4, here comes a free move, for example, h4, here there is the queen invasion, queen to f6, the queen, of course, will move to h6, king to g8, queen to h6, but after knight to f6 we check, it's already a forced checkmate, so terrible position to play for black. In fact, going back to our game, after bishop captures on h7, Magnus Carlsen doesn't capture this bishop, but continues with the best move, knight to d2, forking both rooks. Rook captures on f7, knight captures on f1, and rook captures on f8 we check. The bishop is protected by the queen, so king to h7 only move, bishop back to e5, rook to c1, and rook to h8 we check. King to g6 again an only move. Here comes the knight jump, knight to e7 we check, also forking the queen. King to s7, rook to h7 we check, improves the rook. King to e6, and now it's time to exchange the queens. Knight captures on c8, rook captures on a1, but the queen was protected, and so Wesley So regains the exchange. Bishop captures on a1, the knight is under attack, knight to g3, rook captures on a7, also protecting a4. Here comes knight to f5, that is the best move. Let's go back one move. Why not rook to e1 we check? If rook to e1 we check, king to f2, also attacking the knight, rook captures, king captures. And in this position white is much better. There is also the 2 versus 1 on the king side with the king in a terrible position. This pawn under attack, if advanced, this other pawn can also advance. So we said after rook captures on a7 protecting the pawn, knight to f5, best idea, bishop to h8, and here comes a blunder, rook to e2. Why this move by Magnus Carlsen is a blunder? Because the rook from the 4th rank was protecting g4, so rook to c4, rook to b4 are the best moves, probably to c4 also with tempo against the knight, because now that the rook is not controlling with the help of the pawn g4, Wesley So can play g4 himself, and after h captures, this pawn is pushing away this important knight that was protecting with the help of the king e7. Knight to e3, rook to e7 we check, is also a fork, and this move wins the game. So king moves away, king to d5, rook captures on e8, also this knight is also pinned, so rook to g2 we check, king to h1, Rook captures on g4, the knight is lost, but there is the rook fork on the h5, rook to h4 we check, king to g2, rook captures on h8, and knight captures on b6 we check. Wesley So is a pawn and a knight up. This endgame is completely won for white. Now it's just a matter of technique. King to c5 attacking the knight, rook to b3 protecting it, rook to h4, and now some maneuvering to find the right piece placement. Rook to b5 we check, king back to c6, rook to b1, rook to h5, so stopping the pawn advance, knight back to c4, rook to h4, again knight to b6, again rook to h5, knight to c4, rook to h4, and knight back to b2 protecting the pawn. King to b6, now king to g3 improving the king, rook to d4 and king to f3, king to a5 stopping the pawn, king to e3 again with tempo against the rook to d8 and rook to h1, rook to d5, rook to h4, so now it's time for the knight to improve his position, rook to g5 and king to d3, rook to c5, rook to c4, of course it's changing the rooks now lose on the spot because the king is the knight is protecting the pawn, the king will advance, will shoulder away the black king, and it's game over. So rook back to h5, king to c2, now the king is advancing to stay near the pawn, rook to h3, rook to c3, again changing the rooks is game over, rook to h6 and king to b3 protecting the pawn. Rook to b6 we check, king to a3 protecting everything, rook to c6 is the last trick, because now if white captures the rook, notice that it's stalemate, so rook to c4, rook to h6, rook to c5 we check, and king back to a6. The white king advances, king to b4, rook to h1 trying to give checkmate from behind, rook to c6 we check, king to a7 and knight to c4. Now if there is the rook check from behind, the king will move to c5. So king to b7, rook to b6 we check protected by the knight, king to a7 and rook to g6, rook to b1, king to a5, even better now than king to c5, so the king is also protecting the pawn, rook back to h1 and rook to g7, the king must move back to the back rank, king to b8, king to a6, rook to h5, of course if rook to h6 we check, there is no problem because the knight will jump to b6 and then a5 will be played. Now rook to g8 we check, and in this position Carlsen resigns. Let's make some other moves. King to c7 is the only move. Here comes a5, rook to c5 attacking the knight, knight to b6, rook back to h5. Now rook to c8 we check, the king must move away, king to d6, the white king to b7, and in this position nothing can stop this pawn, only of course a rook sacrifice, because even after rook to h7 we check, there are no problems for white. Rook to b8, the king can't advance near the queen side, so king to e5, here comes a6, a7, a8, and nothing can stop this pawn. So Wesley So is 3 points up. Tomorrow 2 other 45 minutes games that are very important because the slow rapid games give many more points than the fast rapid and the blitz games. So a great victory by Wesley So, but let's never underestimate the champion Magnus Carlsen, who is well known to never give up. Our video is over. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and see you tomorrow for day 2 of the grand final. Thank you very much for watching and goodbye.